Hello everyone, my name is Elton Searson. I work for Think Big Analytics. Today we're going to go over how to use trigger feeds in Kylo by building out our own trigger feed and then also implementing an update to our standard ingest flow to feed some attributes to our trigger feed. And that's going to basically be a report generation table that we're going to be creating. So for a little bit of an overview on how the trigger feed processor here works, this processor is very tightly coupled to Kylo. Here in the configurations, you actually tell this processor to look at the Kylo metadata service and to also watch the JMS servers that Kylo is configured to use. In this case, previously in other templates, you might have seen that configuration attributes like this, where it looks like it's a configuration from some sort of file. These are set up in Kylo, so when you actually go through the setup of creating a feed that starts with this processor in Kylo, you'll be asked what feed name and category you're triggering this feed off of. So that if, for example, we wanted to launch this feed, we wanted to launch our trigger feed every time the food inspections pipeline in category test runs, then when we go through our setup in Kylo, this would be category test and food inspections. Now this property at the very bottom here, this is really important if you ever want to pass your trigger feed special attributes, like maybe some context information from the job that just finished running. For us, we're going to use this to get a hold of the name of the pipeline that was just run, just for the sake of, I guess, showing you guys how to use those. I mean, in our example here, we could just hard code all the values and show you how to use a trigger feed, but we're also going to update standard ingest and get it to pass us some parameters. Hopefully that will give you some more expertise in Kylo. Okay, so my processor group here is very simple. The first processor is trigger feed. The second processor is extract JSON, because when the trigger feed processor is activated, or when it's triggered from Kylo, we get a JSON message that basically contains the attributes that we were asking to be passed to us from the pipeline that's triggering this feed in the this export Kylo property. The way we actually get these is in standard ingest. Let's see if I can pull this up real quick. Okay, so in standard ingest, if you have attributes that are named something like export.kylo.feed and export.kylo.category, these attributes need to exist in the pipeline that's triggering this pipeline, because what this processor here is saying when it's looking for these export.kylo attributes, it's looking for any attributes that start with that, and then it'll take those attributes and import them into this feed's execution. But it'll import them in as JSON and as the content of the current flow file. So to get that out of JSON, to get that out of the content, we need to evaluate JSON path. And for this, the JSON message that we get ends up having quite a few different nested properties. In our case, we just want to get this dependent feed names. And when we go to trigger this feed later, I'll actually show you the JSON that we get, and so you can see how this maps to that. So we're going to get the dependent feed names. In this case, this will actually just get us the whole category and feed name together. So it'll get us test.restaurant inspections, if this is configured to be set up against that pipeline. And now we'll see here if we actually had properties passed to our trigger processor correctly, then we'll know that the feed property, or the feed attribute that we just now extracted, should be greater than 0 length. If that's not, then the pipeline fails. If it is greater than 0 length, then we know we're good, and we can go ahead and set query attributes. Now in this processor, we have a columns attribute and a destination table attribute. The columns are basically just the column names I expect to query from our source table, and then the destination table is the table that I'm inserting the data into. Hit apply, and then the last statement here executes that SQL where we do insert overwrite table, destination table, select all of our column names from test dot restaurant inspections. And then if this execute SQL statement fails, we're going to route it out to failure. Okay, so this is the flow that we or that I've set up here, and I've actually already imported into Kylo. But I'm going to go ahead and import it again. Let's do templates, post-processing, load hive. Do that. And now we'll go ahead and create a new template named post-processing load hive. Create that. Okay. So we have that template now in NiFi, but we need to do one more template modification, and that's going to be to standard ingest this time. So this tutorial is actually also going to cover how to make changes to standard ingest and push those changes to Kylo. So let's go ahead and go down to NiFi flow and go into workspace. And now here we're going to create a new processor group in our workspace called standard ingest post PROCS post processing edition. Okay, so now we have our standard ingest post processing edition. Let's go ahead and zoom out in here, zoom out quite a bit, and then we're going to paste standard ingest in here. Standard ingest. Now because I wanted to make sure that this would all work correctly, I've actually already modified my standard ingest template. However, the only modification that I did was at the very end of the pipeline, after commit high watermark, I add a single update attribute processor that says add export Kylo category to category and add export Kylo feed to feed. We're going to go ahead and hit apply. And then in the case that this commit high watermark processor is successful, which is the last processor in standard ingest, any other is a failure, and it goes on to the failure flow. So this is actually the last processor in standard ingest. I'll go ahead and make sure that there's no other modifications in here real quick. Okay. So now that we have this, the next step is going to be to actually go into templates, download the old standard ingest template, and also another thing you should do is before making an update to any of these reusable templates, actually go into reusable templates and make a backup of your template, if just so you can quickly revert it. This is my old backup right here. I'm just gonna paste a new one right here. And then this one will be named This is just until we know that the flow still works after we finish our updates. Then we can delete these. Okay. So let's go back to our workspace and promote that template, that standard ingest, with our new add-on. And actually, we need to go through some of these processors and fix them so they're no longer broken. When you paste a template into NiFi, it doesn't always connect the right metadata or the right services. So what you actually need to do when you paste something like this is open up any processor that's configured incorrectly and click on the little arrow right here. What happened here is when I imported that, or when I pasted that template back into my own workspace, it recreated the different controller services that were associated with that template. We already have those different services set up. Here we have Kylo Metadata Service and Kylo Metadata Service again. We have Thrift Service twice, JMS twice, except that with one of these in each one, it's broken. So let's just go ahead and delete the one out of each of these controller services that's already disabled and is a repeat of the old one. Okay. So now we're going to go through these broken processors and select the correct service, controller services. Alright, almost there. Alright, so our update to standard ingest is done now. What we're going to do, in order to promote this template to Kylo as a reusable template for standard ingest, even though we already have one that exists, what we need to do is actually delete the old one, copy the name so we can name it the exact same. Remember, if you're replacing a template, they always have to have the exact same name as the old one that you're replacing. And we'll do delete, and now we'll back out and zoom out a little bit in here. Do Command A to select everything, and now we're going to do template standard ingest, all lowercase. Hit OK. Now we're going to go into Kylo, or actually, sorry. Now that we've created a new template, what we have to do is go into templates again, and now we have to download that file. If you already have standard ingest templates in here, you need to delete them, otherwise the names will conflict. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and download this again. Now I just have a standard ingest template. So in Kylo, the reason I downloaded that rather than importing the template from NiFi like we usually do when we create a new feed is because reusable templates need to be imported from a file, and you need to select the reusable template option when doing this. So we're going to go ahead and hit choose file. We're going to go to my downloads, standard ingest. And because it is a reusable flow, we want this checked, and we want to overwrite the existing flow because our flow now is better. So we're going to say import template. Alright, so this was successfully imported. Sweet. Now, we did all that so that our TriggerFeed can get a couple properties or get a couple parameters or attributes passed to it from this pipeline. We still need to actually register that TriggerFeed pipeline and create a feed off of it in Kylo. So if you remember from before, we already created the template. Before we started making our modifications to standard ingest, we created the post-processing load hive template in NiFi. So here in our templates, we're going to go ahead and hit plus, import from NiFi, post-processing, libhive, with no table customization. This says I already have one feed because I already created a feed off of this. We're going to go ahead and hit continue, feed category, feed name, continue. I don't really need to edit anything except for the columns in the destination table. Now, interestingly enough, in our case, we're going to be needing to create a new Hive table because we're basically creating a reporting table. So to do that, let's go ahead and open up the Hive CLI and say use test, and do show tables. Now the table we're going to be running this off of is going to be food inspections. So let's go ahead and select that. We'll do show create table. Okay, now we'll just go ahead and copy all this into our favorite text editor, Sublime Text 2 for me. And for here, we're just going to want a couple columns. Let's say we want to know what the inspection type was. We want to know what the record date was. And we want to know what business it was. This is the company name that the restaurant inspection is being done against. I know that because I've looked at the data. And in here, we'll change this location. And then we can also delete some of this. We'll delete that. We'll delete all the way up to there. Okay, this is going to be our report table. So now that we have this done, we're going to go ahead and paste it into here, create it, and test. Oh, forgot to rename it. Restaurant inspection reports. Show tables. Now we see we have restaurant inspection reports. Okay, so we want to copy that. Okay, so anyway, we now have our desired output table. Since we're still registering this template, we're not setting this stuff quite yet, but we are making it so that the users are required to put input for these columns, or for these attributes. This means that the user is actually going to have to go and create the table themselves, and then also line up the correct column names with the queries. We'll continue on to the next step, continue on to the next step. We're going to go ahead and hit register. Got it. Feed manager, feeds. Now we have this feed. I'm going to go ahead and disable it. And I'm just going to disable it. Okay, so now that we have our post-processing feed registered, let's go ahead and create one. It's going to be post-processing with Hive. It's going to be fill inspection inspection reports table, category test, continue. Here we're just going to say test with our table name, restaurant inspection reports, and then the different columns that we actually want, which are just going to be these guys. Comma, add a comma, add a comma, and we'll just delete this. And we'll copy these column names. Okay, continue on to the next step. There's no other configuration that this pipeline needs other than configuring which pipeline is triggering it. Alright, so here we're going to go ahead and the strategy is going to be trigger event because the only processor that we have for scheduling is the TriggerFeed processor. And the run preconditions that we can specify are going to be dependent upon feeds, and that's it. Start typing the feed, we're going to say test dot food inspections. Actually, I think it's restaurant inspections that we want to use. So we'll say done. Okay, so now we have restaurant inspections. We just have to trigger this feed in order to see our trigger feed executed. So let's go ahead and go into our drop zone. Exit, ls, oops. ls. Now we have sample CSV. So let's go ahead and cp sample. For me, that's the name of my restaurant inspections file. So I'm going to rename this to be CSV, inspection CSV. Okay. And now that's gone. So this pipeline is triggered. Let's go ahead and look in jobs. And then I'm actually going to go into the post-processing pipeline that we made, and I'm going to pause it. Okay, so I'm going to stop that pipeline. All right. That way, once it does start executing, we can look at it. And I can show you some of that JSON. I just accidentally reloaded my page. All right, so it started. That should take about a minute and 20 seconds or something. So I'll have this restaurant inspections file included below in the description if you guys need it. Okay, validate and split records just finished. It just has to merge the table now. This usually only takes about a minute to run. I'm wondering what's going on here. Let's see. Okay, it looks like that pipeline finished. Oh, it actually says completed now. Okay. So now we'll go into jobs, we'll look at running, and we can go back into our new post-processing pipeline under test. Do that, and now we can say go ahead and start. Here in Kylo, we can now see that we have that pipeline running. This was just basically this processor just queries the metadata, um, the Kylo meta store over and over again to get context information about executing pipelines. So once it realizes that a pipeline finishes, this feed will execute once. Now we have, let's go ahead and look at the JSON that we get when we trigger this. So on Finder, and we'll do open with supply text. Okay. So the JSON that we get, we can see here feed job execution contexts. This is the attribute that I'm actually polling, and it just gives me the whole feed name, which is actually the database and table name as well. And then a little bit further inside this JSON, we have export Kylo category, export Kylo feed, where you can reach these attributes. And that's pretty much all we're getting. But we do have those attributes that we said that we wanted to get, which is good. All right, so now let's go ahead and evaluate that JSON. Let's see what the feed ends up resolving to be. Feed is test restaurant inspections. Awesome. I'll go on to the next processor. That worked. So now we'll set query attributes. Let's just make sure these are right. Yep. Go ahead and hit start on that. And then this is going to execute our HQL. Let's see if that works. Yep. All right. Everything completed successfully. Let's see here now in Kylo, this pipeline completed, no problems. And that pretty much brings this demo to a close. If you have any questions, please post them in the description below. And good luck with your pipeline development. All right. Bye.